Hello, BookTube. I've got some mail for you today on a sunny, temperate, clear-skied Thursday. A very, very pretty day in a classical kind of way. The new classical kind of way. The weather shouldn't look this way at all in late December. I shouldn't be sitting here in late December in Boston saying, well, yeah, we haven't had any snow. We've barely had any rain. There's been nothing even close to a hard frost. That shouldn't be true. But it's clearly going to be true this year. There is a storm, uh, fairly big, woolly, unformed thing, bearing down on Boston from the upper Midwest. I don't know, that would probably bring a warm summer rain. But as long as I can get somebody to take the mail in before it gets soaked, I'm happy. we have a bunch of stuff to look at this time around, since I walk you through all of my earthly possessions like every old coot in the world. Starting with the Bedford Times Press, Bedford, Iowa. It's a tiny little local newspaper, tiny little thing, for Bedford, Iowa, in scenic Taylor County, that has the local sports teams and 911 calls and local obituaries, just what you'd expect from a redoubtable old local newspaper. That's just what you'd expect, with one exception, which is what you would see as soon as you open the paper. Me. You see my Ex Libris column. I have a book-related Ex Libris column in a small-town Iowa newspaper for the first time in 40 years. And it feels delightful. It feels absolutely delightful to say again what I once said, which is, I write my column on the weekends. That is a great, great feeling. And this column is not free. The Bedford Times Press paywalls its content. So if you want a subscription to this cute little paper showing up on your door, just go to the website listed below and subscribe. And if you're subscribing not for the Bedford Times Press local coverage, but for my book column, which you can see nowhere else, you might want to mention that to them. I say on behalf of freelance hacks everywhere, if you are subscribing to a journal specifically for one writer, feel free to sound off in your letter or your email or your phone call and say that. I think I'm in good standing with the Bedford Times Press, but even so, it never hurts a for-hire Old Bailey hack if somebody's saying, I like this person enough to put my money where my mouth is. But this latest column starts off, keep in mind, it's huge. They give me half of this whole page. That's fantastic. It's 1,000 words a month, or a week, rather. This is a weekly column, 1,000 words every week. And this one I'll give you a little taste of it, in case you want to know what you're getting for your subscription money. An old friend of mine used to say, there are two kinds of people in this world, those who say toward and those who say towards. Another old friend of mine used to say, there are two kinds of people in this world, those who don't dog-ear the corner of their books, and people who do, who are monsters. Yet another old friend of mine used to say, there are two kinds of people in this world, people who need to read the book before they see the movie, and people who don't. I'm pretty sure you have your own two kinds of people in this world dichotomies. I have plenty of my own, including there are two kinds of people in this world, people who like tassels on their bookmarks, and people who don't. I do. It's one big thing I miss when I'm reading an ebook, although an ebook keeps track of my place for me automatically, which is pretty darn nice. It goes on from there. You'll have to read the column to find out what my two kinds of people are that organize the whole thing. But as you might be able to tell from even that little excerpt, a column is a different voice. That is not the narrative voice that I use in my occasional nonfiction of other kinds. That's certainly not the narrative voice that I use in my book reviews. A column is a different thing. It's much more of an excerpted conversation than it is a pronouncement of any kind. Tremendous. To tap into that voice again and have an Iowa audience for it is tremendous. And I want to point out, it need not be an Iowa audience. Not only, if you, wherever you are in the world, have a local newspaper that you think you would like to see my column in, if you'd like to read me every week, I'm writing this column anyway. There is no reason why it can't appear in your paper if your paper's editor wants it to be there. And if your paper could stand a little livening up, and maybe you know somebody connected with that paper, or maybe you know the editor of that paper, feel free to sing out in the comments field or to email me. The process will almost certainly be as simple as that. I mean, the Bedford Times Press runs this column, but the column is mine. So if you have an editor who would like to run that column as well, I will naturally send a line to my editor at the Bedford Times Press and say, is that all right with you? But the column is already shared with the Lennox timetable in Iowa, and also every once in a while, some of them, the ones that aren't Iowa specific, are shared with the Wethersfield Proctor Library up in small town Vermont. So my editor's already okay with sharing the bounty. If you have a paper that you would like this column to appear in, no matter where you are, trust me when I tell you, the column is of universal appeal. But anyway, that's the first thing. Then the second thing we got is the Vineyard Gazette. Broadsheet newspaper from the island of Martha's Vineyard off the coast of Massachusetts, where I am the book editor. Or not the book editor. I'm not the book editor. I'm a book columnist for the Bedford Times Press. And I am the sort of the in-house book reviewer for the Vineyard Gazette. Somebody else could do book reviews once in a while, but most of the books that you're going to see reviewed in the Gazette are going to be by me. And this is a weather vane that someone has put a stocking cap, a Christmas hat on that weather vane. No idea how you would go about doing that. And the line here is, if Santa were a pescatarian, Menemsha would be his North Pole. But of course, you've got the columns in the back here on gardening and birds and all outdoors. Those are perennially popular with Vineyard Gazette readers. Although I couldn't help but notice in this issue that lodged right in the middle of the paper, not in the book section at all, but in the calendar section, is a beautiful photograph of a snowy owl. All the photographs in the Vineyard Gazette are local, of course. That's a beautiful, beautiful photograph. And not only that, but the words that accompany it. There's a little box. They are here. They have been spotted. They are waiting for you. Honest. The snowy owls are back on the island, tucking themselves into their favorite habitats along the beaches. To see one is to finally know true joy, or garner good luck all year round, or at least have a very cool photograph. And I can attest to that. It's kind of a weird thing for them to put in the middle of the paper, but I can attest to that. It is, oh God. Okay, the problem with broadsheet newspapers is they never go back together. They never go back where they were. But that's all right. It is a joyful experience to be walking along a vineyard beach in winter and suddenly have a snowy owl make an appearance. That's an amazing thing. So to see one is to know pure joy. And then the last of the periodicals is the Times Literary Supplement. We've already missed the Times Literary Supplement. I got one the other day that I don't think I even showed on this channel that had points of interest, including a letter that I wanted to read to you, a little bit of a thing that I thought might cause a ruckus in the letters page, but it doesn't look like it's going to. A reviewer reviewed a book about so-called Muslim tolerance. The tolerance shown to non-Muslims in Muslim civilizations over the ages, in centuries past. And a person wrote in a letter saying, some tolerance. That it was a brutal, horrible existence for people who weren't Muslim. And the author responded to the letter and said, who, me? I wasn't saying it. The reviewer said, I wasn't saying anything. What? I'm merely saying that these groups, these Jews and these Christians, were allowed to live, as opposed to being driven out of the country or exterminated in pogroms. They were allowed to live. It bugged me just a bit. Yes, okay, they were allowed to live, and their sons had to serve in the military and convert to Islam, and they were horrendously fine. Public mockery was not only allowed, but encouraged. They had no legal recourse if their shops were vandalized. It strains the nature of the word tolerance to use it in such cases. But it appears that did not spark a response in this latest letters column. Instead, this letter column was full of pretentious and snooty and picky gems, just left, right, and center. Like, for instance, someone writes from Dallas, Texas about that new biography of of W.G. Sebald that was very conspicuously done without the cooperation of his literary estate. The writer writes, I found Laura Feigel's review of Carol Angier's biography of W.G. Sebald to be intelligent and provocative. But while having the cooperation of Sebald's wife would have enriched and complicated the biography, waiting for full access to his personal papers and the cooperation of his wife at some uncertain date in the future risks losing living informants. Angier's affectionate, probing quest biography is an indispensable act of biological preservation. That was a very interesting idea. Of course, the book has a huge amount of merit, divorced from whether or not the widow cooperated. I like that quite a bit. Then someone from Reading writes in about Macbeth. Andrew Hadfield argues that Shakespeare represents, quote, what looks like a direct defense of early modern terrorism, since Macduff's killing Macbeth is clearly a good thing. But Macbeth is a usurper, who himself kills a king, Duncan, and prevents the inheritance of Duncan's eldest son. Macduff reestablishes the true monarchy, which may itself be a terrorist institution, as we don't know how Duncan got there in the first place, but that's another matter. TLS letter writers, I swear. And then probably another person, William James Earl from New York, writes in about Adam Mars Jones's review of West Side Story, which we mentioned last time. Adam Mars Jones is only half right in describing West Side Story as Robert Wise's film. The co-director was Jerome Robbins, who won an Academy Award along with Wise for Best Director. I may be a bit sensitive here. Robbins left me the Oscar statuette, a most prized possession. But probably the most quintessential TLS letter this time around comes from Ruskington. A writer writes in, although Jane Darcy mentions the spa town of Buxton in her review of books by Melanie King and Ian Bradley, given her name, I would have thought she might have referred to the spa at Matlock, also situated in the home country of her namesake, Fitzwilliam Darcy. Matlock was visited by Miss Bennet on her way to Pemberley, and a few years earlier, Mary Shelley's Victor Frankenstein has also passed through on his way to Scotland. That he was being pursued at the time by his tortured creature must surely suggest that, well, for what actually transpired, can I recommend a good Christmas reading of Kevin Fagan's play When Frankenstein Came to Matlock, freely available on his website. It's just all kinds of picky details from people that you suspect you would not want to be trapped at a dinner table with. But there's also a little bit in the back. The NB column in the back is usually full of opinions, sometimes rabble-rousing. And they have a little piece here that raised a question in my mind for you. Do you need help? Help choosing which books to buy, that is, whether for yourself or someone else? In Church Street, we had to fend for ourselves and came away with 2 forgotten novels. At Stoke Newington's bookshop, back around the corner, a table of staff recommendations eagerly guides customers towards The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin or Under Pressure by Richard Humphreys. Some of these handwritten recommendations sound more personal than others. What Artists Wear by Charlie Porter receives a succinct note of acclamation that says, Sarah says yes, accompanied by a squiggled thumbs up. We hope that somebody is having fun collecting such ephemeral exclamations from the showroom floor of literature. We mention them only after noticing that Foyles on the Charing Cross Road has done away with the customary table devoted exclusively to titles recommended by its own staff. On one floor, we were reassured that staff choice, our staff are a pretty disparate bunch, the ancient mariners of the book world, the Foyles website explains, except that what they want to pass on is their enthusiasm. Still exists. That's a horrendous sentence for NB. Believe it or not, that was all one sentence. And purely for stubborn reasons. If you're writing a sentence and you're thinking, okay, well, I can keep all these plates in the air, I really want this to be one sentence. No. The end product has to determine, and at the end of that, if you determine, well, okay, Cicero might have been able to follow what the nominative is of the predicate that I've eventually got to 300 words later, but a reader of English will not be able. They will have to reread the sentence, and that means you failed. That at the end of the whole thought, once you've got the whole mess of it out on paper like a spilled plate of pasta, then you have to decide, no, this is actually 2 or 3 sentences, and just bite the bullet. But unless you're writing for NB, in which case you don't. I have no idea where we are now. That sentence was even more of a nightmare to read than it was to write. It is easily found, in fact, in the scattered form of printed notes on the shelves rather than in prominently displayed clusters. How fresh are some of those notes? We couldn't be sure. Those notes, those little notes that the writer's talking about that have the staff recommendations on it. In America, in American bookstores, those are called shelf talkers. And they used to be common, and they're not anymore. In the one Barnes & Noble left in Boston, they are almost gone completely. I don't think they're even allowed. And I wondered if that's true for you. Two things. One, does your local bookshop have anything like that? A dedicated table of staff picks, maybe a board of staff picks, or a bookcase, or those isolated shelf talkers scattered throughout all the different sections of the store? Thing number one, does your local bookshop have those things? And thing number two, do you put value in them? Do you use them? And have you ever? Needless to say, years and years and years and years ago, at the bookstore where I worked, I wrote shelf talkers all the time and changed them regularly. At one time, a long time ago, I was writing out a new batch of shelf talkers at the break room table, I think, or maybe at my information desk. I was just writing out a whole bunch of new ones in order to cycle through, go through all the sections of the store, replace all the old ones, all of which had already been written by me, and put in a whole bunch of new ones. I was doing that when some new, Instapot, just add water, 20-year-old manager had just been hired and thought, time to whip all these old fogies into shape. Nobody knows anything but me, the typical 20-year-old type thing. Wandered by and said, we should really let other people write some of those too. And I said, okay, well, I would welcome that. Anybody have anything that they want to do? The whole staff, to a single individual, said, he reads more than all of us put together. And we get a lot of great recommendations from his shelf talkers. In other words, politely, why don't you shut up and just leave well enough alone? But in my own experience, I have found shelf talkers and staff recommendations write-ups to be far more valuable elsewhere than in bookstores. Probably that has something to do with me. I read a lot more than a lot of people do, and I have, for most of the time that I've been reading, also been a critic. So, a card like that would only be of interest to me if I knew the person who was saying it. I will already have my opinion on the book, but knowing what they think of it, I would then have 1,000 questions for them about what your experience with reading this book is. That my curiosity on that level is completely genuine. But in terms of a recommendation of a book that I don't know about, I don't use them in bookstores. But for instance, there was a wine shop I used to go to that had the most amazingly elaborate staff recommendations and discussions of work. It was just incredible. And I'm wondering if your store does that. Do they put a lot of weight on that? Do you put a lot of weight on that? But anyway, that's the mail for periodicals. Now we have boxes. We have not boxes, actually, a small pile of packages here. Only the first of which I'm now noticing is a box. So we've only got one box here, and it is elaborately taped. So it could be from one of you. I noticed that a lot of you think you're mailing. If you mail something to me, a lot of you think you're mailing it to I don't know, the rings of Saturn. So that it's an extremely elaborate process. Oh no! Oh. No, this is quite different. Oh, very nice. All right, so what have we got here? Let's see. We've got a card, and a note, and a book. Someone sent me a book, but this is not a violation of rule number 1. This is served cold. A horror tube anthology. This is the finished paperback copy of Served Cold. 22 horror stories centered around a theme of cold. And this is, as you can see, a horror tube anthology. This is made by a whole bunch of booktubers that you probably watch and like. Regina St. Clair put it together. I helped a little. I wrote the introduction to the volume, and I also have, for the first time in over a decade, a short story in publication, in print, under my own name. That hasn't happened since The Lifted Brow in Australia. That was a long time ago. And this is available. This is the finished copy. Oh, this is just lovely. Just lovely. This is the finished copy that you can get. You can order this on Amazon. I'll leave a link to it down below. It's full of chilly good stuff. I don't know. I don't know if you can get this in time for Christmas. I'm guessing you can't. But you're still going to want to have it, right? You're obviously going to want to have it, if for nothing else than for the intense collectability of the fact that I only have a short story in print under my own name once every decade or so. And the last story that I had in the Lifted Brow, I appeared in a literary journal, The Lifted Brow, in a country I've never visited. That story was about a young drug addict in Prague who overdoses and who is in love with the moon. And pure coincidence, I've written, as you know, if you've watched my many NaNoWriMo videos over the years, I've written a lot of fiction since then. By pure coincidence, this second published story under my own name is set on the moon. So I don't know if that means. But then we've got some packages here that we can go through. It's funny, the whole of the floor is covered in that paper. It's splayed apart into a million pieces when it hit the floor, and yet it does not bring back memories. Ordinarily, in my doggy past, if I looked down at the floor and saw that it was covered in newspapers, it would bring back memories of having incontinent little puppies. But that didn't happen with Frida. She's right over the bed. She's looking right at me. She's not in the video, but she's right here with me. And it doesn't remind me of her because I never put down papers when it came to Frida. I never did. For a weird, heartbreaking collection of reasons. I got Frida as a little puppy, so she knew nothing about house training. She went whenever she felt like it. But I got her when my old pointer, my beautiful Malin Moore, some of you have been watching this channel long enough to remember her, and I've noticed with a pang that she is plenty visible in plenty of old videos of mine. She, unlike Lucy, my Basset Hound was her sister, and Lucy needed to be right next to me at all times. So every one of those early videos where you can see me on the fainting couch and Malin is right next to me, in every one of those videos, my other elbow is resting on Lucy, or the camera is resting on Lucy. She was even closer to me than Malin was. Malin is in a lot of those videos. And at the end of her life, Frida came to me at the very end of Malin's life, after Lucy was gone, when Malin couldn't see, she couldn't really hear. Most of the muscles in her hind legs had atrophied. She had a hard time breathing. She had every problem that you could think of. And was just saying goodbye. She's just folding up shop. That light, the light that kept her here with me, went out when Lucy died. And I had a feeling that was going to be true. I thought there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that the introduction of a new puppy will bring out some life in Malin, but no, Malin had only interest in one thing. But Frida came to us at a time in Malin's life when Malin was at least as incontinent as any little puppy. She never even knew when she was going to go. Puppies at least know. She never even knew when it was going to happen. And so I had already adapted the whole place for emergencies, as opposed to just a little patch of the floor where I put newspapers on. Malin couldn't have made it to newspapers anyway. And since that was true, a tiny little puppy adding to that symphony of urine and little pieces of poop, I barely noticed. I barely noticed the increase. And I was counting on the fact that this fussy little dog, one of the first things that she would teach herself is not to go in her own home. And she did. I never had to potty train her at all. It's a capital mistake, a mistake that when I see owners here in the neighborhood do it, I just turn my face away. Nobody wants my advice. If they do, they'll ask for it. They should. There's no one better equipped to give advice on this particular subject than I am. But it's a capital mistake to try and teach a puppy anything. You shouldn't do it. If you're in the position of having a puppy, just allow me to plead with you. Please don't. Please don't try to teach them anything. Give your puppy unconditional acceptance and waves and waves and waves, crashing tsunamis of love. Give them all of that. Wait for their own instincts to start appearing. When a little puppy has no idea about anything. They don't have any idea about anything. Teach them how to eat, but nothing else. They can eat anywhere they want. They can sleep anywhere they want. They can roam anywhere they want, provided you know where they are and provided it's safe. And they can also pee and poop anywhere they want. Don't try and teach them anything until months have gone by. And then if you do that, if you have spent those early months simply lavishing them with affection and not trying to teach them anything they're not going to be able to remember anyway, by the time they reach the point where they're starting to knit things together, I could see Frida doing that day by day. By the time they reach that point, you will find they need very little instruction, at least in the basics. And most importantly, once they reach that point, if that's what you've done, they will have grown up living and breathing your affection, and that will mean a lot. That's very, very important. But anyway, how did I get on that subject? Oh, right, I glanced at the papers on the floor. Frida does not have any memory of papers on the floor. She would not have any temptation to go and pee on them. But anyway, what have we got here? Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. All right, this comes out in March. This is by Jack Davis, and it is The Bald Eagle, The Improbable Journey of America's Bird. Classic natural history. Fantastic. And with this thing, you immediately think, well, if you've really got the strength of your convictions and you wrote about the bald eagle, then in your author photo, you'll be posing with a bald eagle. Okay. All right. Consider me impressed. So what have we got here? The bald eagle is regal but fearless, a bird you're not inclined to argue with. For centuries, America has celebrated it as majestic and noble, yet savaged the living bird behind our national symbol as a malicious predator of livestock and falsely a snatcher of babies. Famously villainized by Benjamin Franklin in the musical 1776 because he wants the national bird of America to be the turkey. Taking us from before the nation's founding through inconceivable resurgencies of this enduring all-American species, the author contrasts the age when native peoples lived beside it peacefully with that when others, whether through hunting bounties or DDT pesticides, twice pushed this bird to the brink of extinction. Okay, it's awful choppy, but the book hopefully will not be quite so choppy. Fantastic. Well, I love stuff like this, so that's great. All right, so we've got two winners so far. Of course, it's all downhill from Served Cold. But let's see if we can do any better here. See if it at least keeps being. Oh, okay. We've already seen this. This comes out in January. Yes, in mid-January. This is by Fuminori Nakamura. Translated from Japanese by Sam Bett, and it is My Annihilation. And here we have the die-cut cover there. So you've got, at least this is a naked hardcover that does this instead of a paper dust jacket. I never understand why people do this sort of thing with paper dust jackets when that just means it's going to rip to shreds. This is not. That is actually kind of a nice design. And we already saw this. We saw the advanced copy. Let's go through it again, though. Regarded as one of the most interesting Japanese crime novelists at work today, according to USA Today, they must not get out much. Even as his fiction pushes past the bounds of genre, according to the LA Times, well, we all know that cocaine is the snow of LA. That is simply drug-addled to say that he pushes past the boundaries of genre. This author remains as unflinching as ever in his exploration of what it means to be human. Oh, come now. Oh, come now. Oh, can we get to the plot, maybe, and stop with all the sheep dip? In this book, the author scours and lays bare the psychological motives of a killer, crafting a puzzle box of a narrative comprised of confessional journal entries, clever shifts in timeline and perspective, and original psychoanalysis of real Japanese serial killers. The book begins with an ominous sense of urgency that never lets up as a cryptic narrator prepares to assume the identity of a man named Kyodai Kozuka by reading diary pages that reveal a deeply disturbed mind. What follows is an intricately layered revenge story that dissects the framework of identity and memory to answer the questions: what turns someone into a killer? Could it be something as small as a suggestion? It was sleep apnea for me that did it with Deb, but I wasn't a killer. She survived. But God, it was so annoying. I was trying to read, and it was like... Anyway. So the back sheet of this page has a million blurbs for this author. I have read, what is it? Are you going to give me a list of this author's? Oh, this is actually a very pretty hardcover. Are you going to, The Thief, The Gun, Cult X, The Kingdom, Evil, and The Mask. I've read a number of this author's books, and I don't know if it's the translator or just that, I don't know, these reviewers don't have enough to do, but I have not noticed anything extraordinary. But I haven't read this, obviously. This is in the new year. But look at what this is. You not only get that, which brings you to the end pages, but then you get this as well. That's really nice. This is a well-designed book. So Japanese Noir is the next book on the list, but from an author who has never done it for me. Are any of you familiar with Nakamura? Are you familiar enough with this author that maybe he's done more for you than he's ever done for me? I'd love to hear it. Okay, so what do we got next here? We don't have any sell sheets for any of these things. They're all obviously coming from a warehouse. This is by Jennifer Heiss, who is director of Neurofit Lab at McMaster University, and it is called Move the Body, Heal the Mind. Overcoming anxiety, depression, and dementia, and improve focus, creativity, and sleep. Well, how many of you wouldn't want that, right? Move the body, heal the mind. So I wonder if the title is correct, because the one silver bullet for so many of those problems, so many of the problems that Americans especially medicate themselves to their eyeballs for, the one silver bullet for so much of that is physical activity. I know it's a little hypocritical coming from me. I do take my dog on long and vigorous walks several times every day, but I'm also as old as dirt. Okay? I'm also as old as dirt. And therefore don't exercise the way I used to. But for decades, I did. For decades. Either the very stylized but still exhausting exercise of kendo or running. I used to go for a run every night. I ran like a Clydesdale, so I was never breaking any speed limits, but it was tremendously, tremendously renewing. And way too many Americans that I know don't engage in any kind of exercise at all when your body was literally evolved to be running. I wonder if that's what the book will say. Let's find out. Did you know that physical inactivity is as great a risk of factor of dementia as genetics? Oh my, all right, so we're right off the bat with that very thing. I'm telling you, BookTube, if you don't think you have the time, make the time. And if you don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, try it and see. Oh my, try it and see. No matter what stage of health you're in, if you're wicked old, if you're really, really old, maybe not. Although even then, I don't get no exercise. I get exercise plenty because for our long walk, Frida usually likes to cover ground. And a depressing amount of that ground always seems to be uphill. And I do it because I love her and because I know it's good for me. But no matter what, if you just had a serious health scare, if you've got a health problem, something like that, try it. Try it anyway. No matter where you are in life, there is some kind of exercise you can do. And it will make a difference. You will feel it. But anyway, let me get the author get a word in edgewise here. In this eye-opening book, neuroscientist Jennifer Heiss shares her paradigm-shifting research on how exercise affects the brain, finding that intervals of intense workouts, or even leisurely walks, can help stop depression and dementia, lessen anxiety and ADHD, and encourage better sleep, creativity, and resilience. For creativity, I can certainly attest to that. Sleep, I don't know. But creativity, absolutely. Absolutely. Your brain just fires. The key that many friends of mine have come up with when they've noticed that, they've noticed, boy, oh boy, when I'm moving around, I get so many ideas and things that were causing me problems. Suddenly I see the way out. It's just so frustrating, not to have my computer with me. And a number of those people have adopted the tactic of downloading a dictation app on their phone, so they can just talk out their creativity while they're on their walks and play it later. It works wonders. Let's see here. In addition, exercise's anti-inflammatory properties make it among the most effective treatment strategies for those who don't respond to antidepressants. The author provides practical information on overcoming inertia, using exercise to fight addictions, improving memory, and much more, all based on her award-winning research. And she is associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology at McMaster University and directs their NeuroFit lab, where her research examines the effects of physical activity on brain function to promote mental health and cognition in all ages. Her work has been featured on CNN, NBC, CBS, and BBC, as well as in the New York Times, and yet she's heartbreakingly young. I guess that's the way of it, right? That's just the way of it, is that I'm going to look at that and say, how'd you have the time to do all that, Missy? When actually she's got 10 times more qualifications than I do. After a certain point on your own birthday roster, everybody's going to look young. Boy, this sounds great. This sounds just fantastic. Move the body, heal the mind. So this comes out in early March. Fantastic. All right. And then we've got the last of the packages here. Another long video. Good Lord. I was watching a new-ish booktuber make one, I don't know, it has to be maybe the third or fourth video. And they were saying, well, I don't want this to go really long. The last one was at 12 minutes. I thought my followers, the viewers of my channel could tell you a tale or two. All right, so what have we got last here? Okay, this is the finished copy. This is also January? Yes, yeah, this is also January. Something we've already seen. The Antarctica of Love by Sarah Stridsberg in the finished copy. Which is Stridsberg at her very best. I will be the judge of that. Thank you very much. In lucid, often shockingly beautiful prose, the author's unnamed narrator tells the story of her brutal murder and the ways in which the people closest to her moved through life after her loss. She was a neglected child, an unreliable mother, a sex worker, a drug user, and then, like so many, a nameless victim of a violent crime. But first she was a human being, a full, complicated person, and she insists that we know her fully as she tells her story from beyond the grave. We witness her short life, the harrowing murder that ended it, and her grief over the loved ones she has left behind. Interesting. Okay, so we saw this already on this channel. The author is an internationally acclaimed writer and playwright whose work has been translated in more than 25 languages. Good Lord. Fantastic. And this comes out in January. It immediately makes me want to ask a follow-up question like I did for Crampton Hodnett. I immediately want to know, how many books have you liked that were written by dead narrators? That were told, where the story was told by a dead narrator. That's always interesting for me. So there you go. That is the mail. A good little mail haul for toward the end of the week. So we have the Antarctic of Love in January. We have Move the Body, Heal the Mind. That comes out in March. All about the benefits of exercise. I'm not a bandwagon jumper. You have heard me on this channel many, many times say, move around. Get some exercise. Make sure you do it every day. Those of you who have dogs and don't walk them, just sort of let them out into the backyard. What on earth? What on earth? Not just that you're denying yourself the benefits of exercise every day in all weathers. Not, oh, I don't feel like it, I'll just let you outside and do your business. But also in terms of the dog. Take a look at that yard that you're letting them out in and ask yourself, if you were trapped in that yard, how long would it take you to know every blade of grass and be so bored with it that you were effectively out of your mind? If you respond by saying, well, of course I'm going to notice all those details because I have a big human brain, I would trust that you would know better than to respond that way to me. Yes, you have a big human brain and virtually no senses compared to your dog. That I don't understand. So move around and also move your dog around. Walk your dog every day at least once. None of this letting them out in the yard business. Good Lord. Anyway, then My Annihilation by Fuminori Nakamura. The author, Soho Crime, has been behind this author and his American translations from the beginning. The folks at Soho Crime are great. They are fantastic. I will give this author a completely wide open new chance. Maybe I'm just missing things. I don't have any of the earlier books. I got rid of them. Then The Bald Eagle, classic natural history about America's national bird. And finally, Served Cold, which has an introduction and a story by yours truly. A horror tube anthology that is for sale now at Amazon. So there you go. None of these things are, aside from Served Cold, none of these things interest me at the moment, as they're all for the new year. But they might interest you. That's the way the mail hauls are going to be until they dry up at the end of this week. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. God help us, it's long enough. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.